written comments from residents, and I believe you forwarded many of those, if not all of them, along. Are there comments by residents in person?
So we actually had 10 submissions from residents on the Good Hope rezoning, which is part of the agenda today. We also had comments from residents on the Southampton Township data center zoning. So provided all those to the board. You have those prior to the meeting.
And do we have any residents here that would wish to address the board at this time? Yes, sir.
Later on during the comments about Good Hope Ventures.
Okay.
I would also like to address regarding Good Hope Ventures.
Okay. Any online comments?
Yeah, I'm seeing in the chat. I don't know. Wait, hold on. Chat. I don't see anything in the chat.
All right. Then we will move on to our action items. The first item is the approval of our minutes from our May 21st.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the May 2026 meeting.
I'll second.
Any questions or comments? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 2, Hampton Township rezone.
So board, in your board packet, giving you all the materials submitted by the applicant. I see Boney Dahlwood, the applicant, is online. Boney, do you want to, are you going to make a presentation today?
I'm also here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
Floor is yours.
Do you have the presentation?
Yes, you don't.
I do. Sorry about that. We can let Boney do it remotely though.
Okay, either way's fine.
So we were here last summer to present, so most of you are likely familiar with what was presented. It was brought here in 2016 as well, so this has been, or some variation of this project has been before you on multiple occasions in a variety of forms, whether it was under just a regular rezoning or it was under a curative amendment. You can move forward through there. Sorry about that.
So could you give your name and fill?
I'm sorry, Ryan Calhoun. I am one of the members of the applicant entity.
Thank you.
So the subject parcels are 8 parcels at the corner of Good Hope and Wurtsville Road, which is less than 1/10 of a mile adjacent to the Wurtsville Road exit at 81. You can move forward through. Okay. This breaks down the 8 subject properties that were part of the application that was filed with the township. There is a brief history. I think the county's report gives pretty similar map of what the history was, that this was before this board as well in 2016. At that time, it was a slightly different project. There was a recommendation out of this board that it should be approved, that project. The township denied that project. There was in 23, we brought a rezoning application and we withdrew that for a variety of reasons. You can move forward then. We had filed a curative amendment action last summer that was to be forwarded over to the county and the township planning. That did not occur. The township actually did nothing, in our opinion, just let it go deemed denied. We proceeded on to Cumberland County Court of Common Pleas. Being the township had done nothing in referral, if the plan had to be referred out, this body at that point gave, again, an opinion in support of a project. And based on that, among other things, we had sought to amend that curative amendment. We were seeking commercial general. We sought to amend to seek CPL. The judge did not like the procedural request to modify. So being we couldn't modify to CPL, which was in line with one of the recommendations of the county, we withdrew that curative amendment, being it was no longer in line with the recommendations we were receiving at that point, and other things. What we did then was bring this back, similar plan to what we have been bringing forward as of last summer under that curative amendment, seeking CPL rezoning for the plan that's incorporated. That history aligns with pretty much what's in the county's report, as I said. You can move on from here. No, I guess I gave all that history too. So this speaks in the county plan. Again, I think we're sort of mimicking your report without seeing it, is the comp plan from the township, which has been in effect since May of 2015, since has represented in their future land use map that these parcels be commercial. As most of you would be aware, the MPC suggests a 10-year review or revision. We are now exceeding 11. I believe at the last meeting, the township has now finally engaged a firm to begin that process. But this is stating these parcels have been, and the recommendation, again, not binding precedent, but this has been what has been held out to the public for more than 10 years. Next plan is the county plan, which I presume you're even more familiar with, which again, that this aligns with the county. This also aligns with where the county was in 17 under their plan, and again, with the county's recommendation in 16. You can move on from there. This is the plan we're bringing forward. This aligns with the CPL zoning that we're seeking in this site-specific relief under the curative amendment, especially retailer, small retail, and a convenience store on the corner with fuel pumps. There. As part of the plan, this has been consistent throughout, that to the south side of the parcel and then also on the west side of the parcel, we would incorporate some sort of buffer into this to provide buffering to the adjacent residential parcels. Different pictures of the same buffer. You can move from there. Sorry about that. You were trying.
There's a few second delay.
And then we just had traffic considerations. We've completed some degree of a traffic study. As most of you are aware, when the project would move forward, there would be a full comprehensive traffic impact study would have to go to PennDOT for approval of any improvements that are made there. I think this area, as Boney could speak to and has been highly studied. The hospital, Penn State Hospital, there's a lot of traffic that was done with that. There's also traffic studies that are ongoing for Good Hope Road improvements and so forth. So we believe we will be consistent with whatever PennDOT requires of the area. And based on our study, there is adequate room for the project that we're implementing.
What was the date of the KDT study?
So we did this prior to the curative amendment last year. So this would have been conducted in the summer, was the first count. Then there was comments. We sent it to the township. They had it reviewed, and the township's review came back and said, can you do counts while school's in session? So we did that in late summer prior to school, and then we took additional counts once school started. So it would have been August, September, would have been both of them of 25. And that's all that I have for you. I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone may have. It just lays out the access that we would recommend, which is turning in off of Good Hope, and then also a right in, right out only off of Brooksville, which is similar to what we have previously presented as well.
The planning commission's reference of the previous meeting we had last August on this issue, our official action was to recommend denial of rezoning from RC to CG and consider applying CPR or CL zoning districts, and also to recommend the township to update its comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance while working with residents and businesses. So that was your action from last August. Since that time, the township has taken steps to update its comprehensive plan. We actually have a grant with them through our Cumberland Plans grant program to do that.
And then Kirk, just to clarify, it sounds like in 2016, we actually did recommend the approval to the CL. So
Correct.
For his presentation, okay.
So I know Solicitor Coyne's here today. I don't know if you want to make any comments to the board on behalf of the township.
Just briefly, just on procedural, what Attorney Calhoun has stated, the current board is undertaking efforts for the comp plan. That it's a brand-new board in Hampton Township as of January 1. So this board, unlike the prior board, is moving forward with having public hearings on this matter and not looking at a deemed approved situation that occurred previously. Our Township Planning Commission met earlier this month and recommended denial. So, proceed.
Any other comments?
Could you just speak a little bit more,
Come to the table.
You can, from there's fine.
just for the solicitor, could you explain the rationale behind the denial, the township's denial? Was there a prevailing sentiment, or
I'm sorry, I didn't.
could you explain the rationale behind the Township Planning Commission's recommendation of denial?
Well, I mean, the Planning Commission had a lengthy public hearing, for the PC Commission, very extensive, the same presentation that Mr. Calhoun and Dawood made here today was the same presentation that was made to the Planning Commission. A benefit to the Hampton Township is there is a continuity with the Township Planning Commission. The members on there are consistent through all these years of different variations that Attorney Calhoun has indicated. I'm the new solicitor as of January 1, so I'm not as read into the history of that as Solicitor Brenneman had been for that. So as far as their rationale, they made a very detailed analysis on the record, indicating that generally the concept was that where the dividing line of Good Hope Road is to the east was generally considered for commercial development. This parcel is to the west of that, and there was significant commentary from residents in the RC district who indicated that, you know, the proposal here for under this presentation was for a gas station right next to a gas station for that, and there's gas stations that are less than a half a mile from there, and the commercial corridor that Hampton has striven for is established east of Good Hope Road through the township there. You have Valley Road, you have Technology Parkway, you have all the significant commercial development there. So to the extent the analysis and the efforts by the Planning Commission, I think the record would speak for itself on that, but they were very lengthy hearing that they had on the matter.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks to the commission for allowing me to speak. I filed my comments.
If you simply have your name for the.
Yes, sure. I'm Jim Mealy. I'm a resident of the Pinehurst development in Hampton. We're a development of about 110 properties. I'm also part of an ad hoc group of other developments that have been very active in examining the need for the GHV proposal. The group includes Wentworth Estates. It includes Greenwood Circle, which is the community most heavily affected by the development. Also Wellington and Westbury, which are up Lordsville Road, but also experience follow-on effects from the increase in commercial business development further east on Lordsville. Before I get into the substance of the comments, I just want to review a couple of your recommendations in your August 25th analysis. The first one was that the residential commercial zone was not appropriate for subject properties. Properties should be rezoned to either CPL or CL. The township should prioritize land use compatibility with residential development to minimize impacts on neighboring communities. We feel that's a very important consideration to be taken into account. The fourth recommendation was that the township developer and community should work toward an amicable community-driven solution outside of the curative amendment process, which is something that our residential communities are all in favor of. And also finally recommending updating the comprehensive plan, which, as you've been made aware, is underway at this time. Ryan went through the rather contorted history of the attempts to develop these properties dating back to 2016. I just want to touch on some of the major concerns of the residents, which I think get lost if you attend the Hampton Township proceedings. And I think one of the members of the commission or from the county was at the last meeting. There's dynamics and issues in context which you don't get here. The first is failure to adequately communicate with the HOAs. Through the process, it's been a kind of a one-way communication where GHV files something with the township. The residents find out about it, somewhat later, maybe weeks later. There's no outreach or communication to bring us on board, to give us a sense of what's being planned. It was only, I believe, in 2025 when there was such a vocal outcry over the most recent iteration that both the board of the township and the planning commission directed GHV to sit down and meet with the communities. And GHV did make a good faith effort at that point, after some arm twisting, to bring us into the conversation. And, it was respectful. They listened to what we were interested in doing. We were looking at some variation on residential development, which might have been somewhere similar to the Versant. It's kind of a high-end development along Smith Drive, which would be something that would fit very conveniently and make sense given the residential nature of the surrounding area. We also proposed some other types of businesses. What it always came back to was that there was a recognition that insufficient return could be realized by anything but what we're looking at today. Okay. So it was kind of like, thanks, but we're not interested. So as you know, last year, we had the proceeding before the township, we had the proceeding before you all, and then it went to Cumberland County Common Pleas Court. All of that kind of evaporated. And I guess we're back to where we were before, which is this proposal was filed in May. We didn't get notice of it. I mean, it was strictly through word of mouth that we found out about it. And of course, that doesn't do a whole lot to encourage a lot of trust among the communities. So that's where we're at. Looking at the substance of the proposal, addressing what we view are the adverse impacts on the communities, this iteration doesn't really change a whole lot. And the Planning Commission recognized that. It was pretty much unanimous that, we've been down this road before. It's kind of like Groundhog's Day, where we're kind of reliving the same set of circumstances with no resolution. Prior to the proposal that was made in May, the Keystone business was supposed to be a Starbucks, which we felt was inappropriate in terms of the surrounding residences. That's something that appeals to I-81 traffic. As everybody knows, when they're on a trip, a lot of times you're looking for a coffee break. That disappeared. We're now with a convenience store. As was pointed out, we have a Turkey Hill, okay, which is a very busy convenience store. We have a Sheets further down Wurtsville, which went in with some degree of opposition. That's in the UPMC complex. And we have Giant and Weiss. So there's all kinds of gas stations right off 81. The other thing is Turkey Hill being convenient. I use it. It's also an attraction for less than desirable elements. Any of these stores, they push smoking products, they push energy drinks, they push all kinds of things that, as we've often seen, attracts the types of clientele that may be less desirable for that area. It's also been the target of a number of holdups. And I had a conversation with one of the Pinehurst residents recently. She lived in Pinehurst for 30 years. Her husband was at Turkey Hill during a holdup. Fortunately, he didn't go in. The guy in the hoodie was at the counter, did his business, and took off. I pursued this discussion with Hampton's chief of police at our HOA meeting, and he doesn't like to admit that there's a lot of, that there can be crime in Hampton, but Turkey Hill is a problem. And they posted police along the strip out there on Worksville, partly to monitor the traffic, which is in and of itself an issue, but also as a result of the holdup that went on. So, our concern is we get another gas station, it's going to be another target, okay, and something we really don't need. As far as the other businesses, when you identify something as being a retail property, as you know, it can be a whole category and range of potential business interests. We do not see additional retail in that particular location as attracting any type of high-end stores. What we'll probably end up with, as Carlisle Pike attests to, is if you can't lease it out to a desirable business, there's always a dollar store. There could be yet another vape shop. There are all kinds of things that, frankly, I think the township has enough of. And, the idea is you unload it to the people that will pay the rental fees or the lease agreement, or enter into the lease agreements. So aside from the businesses, we have the ingress and egress from Worksville and Good Hope. If you're familiar with Worksville, as you head west, it goes from 4 lanes to 2 lanes, and it's a racetrack at rush hour. I know when I get off I-81 and I live in Pinehurst, I have to a lot of times take my life in my hands and try to find a short, maybe a couple of seconds when I can get over to the lane that takes me down into Good Hope. We're going to be adding additional traffic attractants with this development that's being proposed. Ingress and egress will have to be made either off Good Hope or off Worksville shortly after the light. Okay. GHB in this most recent iteration did make some changes to the entrance ways. They pushed the Worksville Road further west, the ingress road further west, and the ingress road from Good Hope further south. It really doesn't help a lot. Good Hope's a busy road, got a lot of medical facilities there. You got PAM, you got JDC, you got Cremain Farms. All of this is just going to simply add to the congestion which we experience at that intersection. Finally, I want to touch on the types of businesses which GHV is proposing. If you look at the CPL and CL designations, which was helpfully included in your recommendation back in August, there's a lot of potential businesses that could be conceivably acceptable to the development. And, I referenced, for example, under the CL district, you have listed, there's medical offices, dental offices, doctor's offices, labs, physical therapy facilities, which are all over the place. There's senior housing. There are a lot of categories of businesses which are not 24/7. They're 5 day a week, no weekends. They're 9 to 5. They don't get a crunch of traffic, and in many cases could be supplemental to what we have at the Hershey Medical Center. If you go over to Camp Hill and you see the Penn State Holy Spirit facility, all of the businesses around there are adjunct to the hospital. They're providing medical services, specialized services, et cetera. That would be an opportunity, I think, that could be pursued. And then the final point I'd like to make is that both Hampton and the Planning Commission did offer the opportunity for GHB to participate in the comprehensive plan. I understand their frustration. It's been a long time. They've been trying to make some progress here. But part of that has been kind of their own approach to doing business. But they weren't interested, okay? They rejected that out of hand. So it seems to me you want to be part of the solution, not an obstruction. So that's concludes my comments.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
My name is Doug Austin, live at 5001 Greenwood Circle, immediately adjacent to the proposed development. Been there 22 years before any of the development on the east side of Good Hope was put in place. So we've seen this process go through for a number of years now. I've been in this whole discussion since the beginning. To fill in a couple blanks about the township, what's going on with there, if anything, this whole process has brought the 5 communities that Ms. Amelia mentioned together, because conversations about this have been challenging and troubling and have resulted in us, I think, coming together in a way that hasn't and wouldn't have happened in any other way against this development, because there's been such a lack of conversation with us about the intent and purposes of this property. I won't reiterate much else, but also say crime. I was one of the victims of crime. I was assaulted in my driveway by a person who was in that area because he stayed at a hotel next to the Turkey Hill. Fortunately, the guy was drunk and wasn't able to do much, but it was a bottle broken and an attack on there, and I prefer not to have anything like that happen again. Just a couple points about this. This issue of pocket zoning and the presentation and the documentations, they provide 5 examples of what should be comparable areas that would lend this to be zoned CPL. None of those 5 actually are relevant to this. All 5 of those, for example, Wurtsville Road, Technology Parkway, Sporting Hill, Carlisle Pike, these areas are consistent with linear stretches of commercial property in both directions. What's happening at our place, and you know right there now, is for 2.5 miles west of the Good Hope, it's either residential country in our township or residential in Silver Springs Township. What would happen with that piece of property right there is to create an aberrant zoning within an area that it shouldn't be. In fact, where the Turkey Hill is the only commercial general within that area. The next commercial general is not down till Carlisle Pike. Everything else is Office Park or CPL to the east of that. So this whole premise of a pocket zoning seems to be built upon an analysis that is not, I think, not real, and I think is expected to actually scare us into allowing this to happen and go forth in a way that we don't find to be positive. Some of the alternatives have not been explored. As I mentioned, Office Park is what is primarily part of the east section of Good Hope Road. Across from our property, for example, is Office Park. Across where the new Penn State is Office Park. That was not part of the options put forth in the county's analysis of this. Commercials, 3 options of that was looked at, but Office Park wasn't part of those. Also, Resident Town wasn't part of those. So I would suggest that the county should do a little bit more homework and be more inclusive in terms of their analysis of what the options are, and look at those and further explore those before going forward with any sort of recommendation to the township about where this should go. As Mr. Amelia suggested, there has been very little involvement to the public. We were all surprised by the most recent and more egregious proposal. There was a Dunkin' Donuts prior, a number of years ago. There was, as he said, a drive-through coffee shop. All along the way, the threat was made that if we didn't agree with what they were doing, an outside developer would come at some point and put in a gas station. Now that's what's on the docket right now. A gas station immediately behind our neighbors across the street. Anybody who lives in anywhere and has a house would recognize that putting a gas station behind your house is never a good thing. The barrier that they propose is minimal. We're already experiencing noise, pollution. I'm always picking up wrappers and cans and stuff on my road from the Turkey Hill. That's enough. They put in a car wash recently updated that has fluorescent red and blue lights that flash back and forth all the time. We don't want that. Nobody wants that in our area. So I suggest that we need to continue to explore these alternatives. Public involvement, I think, is a key point here. The Hampton Township Board has recommended that they be much more open to those conversations. That hasn't happened yet. We need to go forward with that. And I think, as I suggested before, the residents, I think, are even more opposed to the current proposal than they were in the past. The township meetings, both the Board of Commissioners and the Planning Committee meetings, generally are packed when this issue comes up. There's a petition that had somewhere between 300 and 400 names signed on it opposing this sort of thing. So if anything, I think that the county should recognize that what's being proposed now is not acceptable in any way. And we have a long way to go before there's something that can come out of this. We hope that the county or the township plan will help with this. That process needs to run its course. We should allow it to do that before anything goes forward. And we should fully involve these 5 neighborhoods in particular. But the whole Wurtsville corridor and what happens to that needs to be considered as we move forward with this. So thank you very much for the opportunity to comment.
Thanks, sir.
Can I just speak to 2 things if they're complete?
Certainly.
Just wanted to address, I think, and the county identifies this, these are unique parcels as compared to surrounding. There's 5 lanes of Wurtsville Road in front of these residential structures. They're immediately adjacent to a nearly more than 300,000 square foot hospital. So these parcels that sit on this major intersection are different than those that are around it. So we're not seeking properties of similar to be treated differently. It's evident by looking at these, they are different by where they're situated. To make these residential, it's a challenge, right? These aren't roads that you would typically look to put driveways in abundance. You know, we don't need 5 driveways, 4 driveways. I don't think it's safe for them to access these roads. The other item is on public outreach. I think the failure to reach consensus isn't indicative that we didn't, right? There has been public meetings. Yes, it is correct. There can't be a consensus that's met. We met with these communities individually. Not every member of them. I don't think every member shows up. Some believe they represent everyone. Clearly they don't, but they're not in the line. Some said you can do this commercial. Some say put a park there. Some say put residential there. So we're meeting with them. There's just not consensus. And I just want to be clear, because we haven't reached consensus doesn't mean we haven't made outreach.
Thank you. Any other comments that would like to be shared at this time? Any comments from commission members?
I just like to say, I agree that RC is not the right district there. I see your point with the way Wurtsville is developed. Like, would be very difficult and undesirable to have a residential use there. However, if you look at the definition for like the next zone down from what you're requesting, the CL zone specifically exists to maintain a quiet, compatible, and uncongested environment, intermingled harmoniously with existing residents. I feel like that's exactly the type of setting that we have here. Like, you're surrounded on both sides, on that side of Wurtsville and Good Hope, by existing residents. That's consistent with what we recommended in 2016. I just feel like that's the better use if we're going to go to a commercial zone for this parcel, for these sections of parcels.
Thank you. Any other comments from commission members?
I'll just, I know there's been some comments about the adjacent properties condition. And I'm wondering, are there site design standards, are there lighting standards that exist within the ordinances? If not, is that something that should be recommended? And if they do, simply, it seems like it's an enforcement issue and not necessarily indicative of wrong use on those properties.
They do have standards for screening buffering in their ordinances. That would be more of a land development issue So that would come on the plan and the township would enforce that. If this were approved and it went to a development of some sort. At this stage, we're just looking at the zoning change to allow these different uses. And it could be any of the uses on that table. I know they're showing right now a convenience store and a retail, but we always look at rezonings as they can show you anything conceptually, but until a plan is actually submitted, it can be any use in that table. So another reason why we recommended the CPL or the CL district was because some of the more intense uses in commercial general are not permitted in the CPL and the CL. So it makes it more harmonious with residential to go with the CPL or the CL.
Thank you.
And I think, Matt, I agree with what you're saying in concept that, finding some sort of compromise solution where, this is the first time that we're kind of breaching that dividing line at Good Hope Road. So the effort to create a land use there that fits with the residences that are on the west side of the road seems like kind of a, if you're not going to do it here, when are you going to do it, right? There needs to be some sort of, compromise solution put in place. But that said, I mean, these residences, as I understand it, predate a lot of this development that seems to be just kind of pushing towards the west. Sure, 81's, a driver of commercial traffic and things like that. But, if this gentleman lives here and, predates any of this commercial development, he didn't sign up for this. So he's more or less at the mercy of the township's decisions to make any kind of rezoning in this area. This isn't what he signed up for, if you will. With that in mind, I mean, just thinking about, this to me, the township needs to kind of make a decision about what it wants, this area to be. And we talk about looking at the comp plan, at the rezoning. Ultimately, it's the township's decision. It's a local issue to make those decisions about what land uses they want and where they want those within the township. That's the point of having these zoning ordinances in place. But with this being a lingering issue that's been going on for over a decade now, we can review the application on its merits the same way we did a year ago, same way we did 10 years ago. But ultimately, I think it comes back to the township to show leadership on the issue.
I think you make a good point there too, Tim, because I think both sides on this is, this is a tough one. You can see both sides, but I think both sides are looking for predictability and consistency. And for predictability for the residents, what are we looking at to the future? Same way for the applicant. We have a comp plan that's under update, right? But it's old. We have a comp plan that's showing this parcel as commercial in the future land use map, but yet the zoning underlying it allows no commercial uses. There's inconsistency there. We have a residential country. Again, it's when you look at that and read the purpose of that zoning district, probably isn't accurate to what's going on in the whole area or the intent of that district. You have a CL district that has strong standards on convenience stores, but then those strong standards aren't carried over to the CPL district. So you have inconsistencies, especially with a use like this in convenience stores, which can be challenging to surrounding neighborhoods. So, as you were saying with the township update, I agree. I think the township, as they do this, looking at the comp plan, updating the zoning, because, township has changed a lot and it's getting to the point where it's built out. What's the next frontier for Hampton Township? Some of these zoning districts may need to be, put together, altered a little bit to take into account some of these issues, because a lot of the development that's going to happen in Hampton Township in the future may be redevelopment, or it's going to likely be close to residential areas to make sure that compatibility that you mentioned, and I think is the rub of, especially on this application, is going to be very important in the future.
Any other comments?
Kirk summarized our action from last summer. I went back and took a look at that as well. And, I think the current proposal is consistent with our recommendation last year. I do agree, Kirk, the inconsistency between the CL and the CLP district or CPL district in terms of convenience stores. I don't know why that wasn't carried forward into the CPL district, but that aside, the general intent of this district, and I, just reading from the ordinance, the purpose of CPL is to provide reasonable standards for the development of commercial uses located adjacent to office and residential uses without undue harmful effects. District is intended to be limited to uses which cause minimal air pollution, noise, glare, fire, and safety hazards to provide public convenience, to minimize traffic congestion, and fulfill other broad purposes. I think, what we're seeing is consistent with that goal set forth in the township's ordinance.
Thank you.
I think one reason why you're seeing the inconsistency on the CL to CPL is the text amendment that the township approved to allow the sheets to go in at St. John's and Carlisle Pike. That was a text amendment that allowed convenience stores within CL, and they put those restrictions on them. So I think that's another thing. You're seeing layers and layers of text amendments occurring that are creating that inconsistency.
Any other comments? Anybody care to make a motion on this topic?
Purposes of putting the issue on the table, I'll make a motion that we recommend approval of the request to rezone from the RC district to the CPL district.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have motion and a second. Do you have any questions or comments?
I might also add that although we have heard from a number of people expressing concern about the development, we also did receive comment favorable to the development.
Thank you. Any additional comments? I will be abstaining from the vote due to a business relationship. So at this time, I'd ask all of those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Opposed.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Just for the record, say it's 6-4, 2 against with Tim and Matt against, right? Okay, thanks.
Then moving on to the Southampton Township Data Center, Mr. Hoffman.
Thank you.
I've been working with Southampton for a while on the data center ordinance. If you remember, Southampton came to us maybe about a year ago, Larry, with a data center overlay. We had a lot of concerns with that because they had some things in the overlay where data center wouldn't be suitable. They had like a preserve farm. And the township said, yeah, we know it's preserved, but obviously that area is excluded. Anyway, the township received a request to expand the overlay to another farm, and they had lots of people show up opposed to that. And our recommendation to that was the township needs to sit down and figure out where they want data centers, where they have infrastructure, and make a decision instead of having an overlay here and expanding it here and including areas that you can't develop in the, just figure out where we want them. And so I offered to work with Larry, and Larry put together a proposal sent to us, and it basically will eliminate the overlay completely, and then it will allow data centers in their manufacturing district. I think it's a much better fit. I've been working with Larry. We have some comments here. A lot of it's just cleanup administrative things, nothing significant. Larry, do you want to add anything?
Well, you're doing an excellent job. What Steve is saying is correct. We wanted to get something on the books because we knew data centers were coming into the area and we were getting pressured from data centers to do something. As Steve said, we also had a resident come in and request that his property be added to the data center overlay. Whether or not it was an oversight on the township supervisors to include his property, I cannot say. I don't know what they were thinking at that point, because of Walnut Bottom Road, the area that we were talking about, the resident lives at, was on the other side of Walnut Bottom Road. And they did a cutoff, basically, kept it to the northeast or northwest side of Walnut Bottom Road, which Walnut Bottom Road is in Shippensburg Township. So it divides Southampton, and it has Shippensburg Township goes up and goes to the interstate, which is right here. This is all Shippensburg Township right here. Over here is Southampton Township. Over here is Southampton Township. And the corridor of Walnut Bottom Road is Shippensburg. So it does divide our township. And when they were looking at, they were talking about at one time going to stop at the airport road and include this area because of the commercial area that's up in here. After talking to the county and bringing everything up to where we are today, the supervisors felt that that was not a good make to change the zoning for that area. And therefore, we come back to the county and ask the county for guidance on this. And after the supervisors determined that they wanted to keep it in close to the commercial area and the manufacturing, that they decided let's just keep it in the manufacturing. That's it, nowhere else. It's already, that has the utilities there, has the infrastructure there to handle a data center, and it's right off the interstate. So therefore, this would be the best place for it. So at that point, after that, we looked at our data center section and went through the data center section. After visiting certain data centers that were in New Jersey, I went and I personally went to a data center and looked at that, seeing what we need to address for the future of the data centers. And now they're changing, just like everybody in this room knows, data centers are changing every day. They're having different ways that they get their power, they get their water, whether it be a closed loop system. I mean, everything's changing daily, pretty much. And therefore, it's going to be hard to keep up with the data center situation. But we want to, what is currently out there is what we can prepare for at this time. And therefore, we wanted to address that. And we went down through, took the comments from county. Hey, you might want to clean this up. Might want to do this. Check with your check with your solicitor. We did all that. I addressed every single one of the comments that Steve had and made the changes before I presented it to you here at the planning committee or planning commission. I'm sorry. And therefore, that's basically where we're at today. That's why it's in front of you to look at and get your opinion on anything that you see that should be changed. We'll take into consideration when I'll take it back to the supervisors, and of course they have the final say. So that's where we're at.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate county for helping us with this data center section.
Thank you. Any questions?
I'd just like to say thank you to Southampton. I think you responded to concerns of the community, which is very positive. A question I have, though, is more, again, procedural and maybe higher level. You know, it is Wild West out there. You start trying to think about making enough ordinance language to specify, and I'm impressed that you looked at, for instance, closed loop cooling. My question really, though, is has your solicitor commented on how much you can actually define in the ordinance related to such things as power generation, types of cooling? Everybody is kind of in agreement on noise, for instance. But has your solicitor given you a clear opinion that everything you put into the ordinance is pretty solid?
His reaction to it, he says, everything is in here, I can defend. So that being said, I would say that's his approval.
That consistent with what you, I mean, you haven't had our solicitor look at it, of course, because it was a township issue, but just as a general question, it comes up, you know, can these ordinance, and the reason I'm asking the question is every township is trying to do the same thing you're doing.
I understand.
And just to look ahead a little bit, you know, is it defensible to demand type of power and where the power is coming from? Is it defensible to say it has to be a closed loop system? You know, do you guys have any input on that or any thoughts?
I think the use, Ed, is so new, and we've only seen the one in Middlesex Township. And I think the use is new nationwide. So I don't know if it's been challenged yet. I haven't seen anything or heard of anything that has challenged some of the requirements for a data center. Another question that we often talk about is, you know, they require data centers to have architectural requirements for data centers, different facades and fenestration, and a lot of things for data centers to make them look nice. But you can put a warehouse on that same property and there's no requirement for architecture. So there's a lot of things that are required of data centers that they're so new, we haven't seen a challenge yet. So the fact that their solicitor is willing to defend it is wonderful. And it's kind of one of those, let's see what happens with data centers, because 5 years ago, if you'd have told me that we were going to talk about data centers as much as we are, I'd have said, what's that? And it's happening that fast. And it's getting a lot of attention from residents on social media. It's just a big, scary new thing. So I guess to answer your question is buckle up and then let's see what happens. We really don't have any examples or a lot of cases to look back on it and see what is enforceable.
So just in terms of our consultation as the program, the Cumberland County Planning Department, we really can't opine much about, you know, this probably isn't defensible. That is, in other words, if the township wants to say, bring your own power, and the township wants to say, recycle your water, don't use any. As far as we're concerned, the township has the right to do that.
And that's why we often lean on the solicitor in those cases where we're like, I don't know if you can do this. I haven't seen this for other land uses. What does the solicitor think? And the solicitor is comfortable. If it is challenged, they will be the ones to defend the ordinance. So that's kind of how we lean.
Starting point for negotiation too. So if a project comes in, they don't like that, I think they can negotiate out of it.
Yes.
I think in this case, it's very pro-community, you know, that, hey, we want to, you know, protect our community, and then we'll back off of that. So I think we've seen that in a lot of the ordinances that are out there, that they're probably a little on the stricter side, which I'm definitely not criticizing any municipality for doing that, because it is an unknown use. As Larry said, the technology is progressing so quickly, you know, to be a little stricter, especially on water and energy things like that, it's probably a good idea now, because, you know, the technology of today may not be the technology of tomorrow. All the requirements could change. So trying to be a little more protective of your community probably is a good step.
But to your point, Kirk, with how quick the technology is changing, should you really codify something that's relating to the technology in the ordinance versus just like a straight, like, I know the township isn't necessarily where they go for the water usage, but like wherever they go for the water usage approval, like that's regardless of what technology they're using. You have that much water you can use. How you achieve that is up to your own operations and how you operate the data center.
Yeah, and I think in some of the other ordinances that haven't been as specific as this have requested that they use BMPs for energy and water usage. So they leave it a little more open-ended, so that it's not, you have to do closed loop. It's show us how you're conserving water and energy, which may be a little more flexible for the future technology.
I do think that no matter what, I mean, as long as the proposal on its merits is well thought out and they're doing what they believe is in the best interest of their residents, then sure, there's going to be some inconvenience down the road, have to go back and update these things, try and stay on top of it the best they can, but still probably better to do something rather than nothing. So.
And the lack of state regulation at this point is kind of problematic, because when you think of any ordinance, it would say that the developer has to comply with the following state level issues, right? And at this point, we don't have that. Even though the grid proposal is a carrot approach, it's still not a mandate. It doesn't really inform the ordinances. But again, just to go back, I think Southampton's done a nice job of trying to respond to citizen concerns, and give you a lot of credit for that.
Thank you. And I would agree, it's a moving target. The technology is a big question mark as to how fast it moves. We have closed loop technology that's in play now, but I do not believe that the volume of production of that type of componentry is such that it's able to be implemented 100% in 100% of the developments. So those things, change over time, and obviously predicated on water resources and electric. So moving target, but I thank you for your efforts. I think you did a great job. Does anybody care to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we recommend approval of the Southampton Township zoning text map amendment, subject to consideration of staff comments.
Is there a second? Thank you. We have a motion and a second.
I'm sorry, who seconded?
Me. Brandon. Any additional comments or questions? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving to Lemoore.
Good. Gene Kuntz with us today. I don't know if you want to give us an overview of what's going on.
Well, actually, this is one of the simplest things we have in Warren these days. Not everything is as simple. I'll try to keep it brief. We have right at the end of Market Street, right on the line with Camp Hill, there's a commercial development and office development that's come to us to ask to consider us to rezone it so they could convert the top 2 of their 3 stories to residential. And actually, I think the adjacent building right across the street in Camp Hill is doing the same thing. Haven't got confirmation of that, but that's what they appear to be doing. The rezoning, it is contiguous with the office residential behind it, so it's not creating an island, which is always a concern. It will connect with the adjacent zoning unit. And frankly, I can't speak for the rest of council or for the rest of planning commission, but I will say that certainly in Lemoyne, we certainly need additional residential units more than we need additional commercial units. So at least personally, I think it would be a benefit and a good project.
Yeah, we looked at this one and we had really no concerns. They're taking away a lot of commercial, by rezoning it, it will take away some of the higher impact commercial uses, but it will allow for apartments. There's lots of parking in the back. It's going to provide more housing units. I don't know if they're going to be considered lower income units. I didn't really get into that, and neither did the applicant, but they're going to be apartments, and that is definitely a need throughout the county. So we didn't really have a lot of concerns with this one, and I didn't know if there's anyone else here that wanted to speak.
I'm pretty familiar with that property and the way you outlined it, that it would be the second and third level. It's a very terraced property because the drive going up to it, I remember that from being a kid trying to ride the bike up there, which I was able to do that then. I'm not sure I can do it now, but there, even though it's like one property, it's almost 3 separate buildings. So I think what they're proposing to do would be very much fitting. And if you get to the north side of that, adjacent to that property, is the borough of Camp Hill, which is all residential. So it's kind of makes sense.
The one question I had, Steve, of that parcel, I think it's an appropriate use, but that parking is so challenging. I mean, I had parked once and thought I was gonna have to call like the police to come help me get out of it. Yeah, it's very tight and high, crazy. And Steve, so I don't know, will parking be less intensive? I would think it would be as residential than the current makeup of commercial use.
I'm trying to find it on this map to show the terracing, but maybe I should just stop trying to do two things at once.
I would agree with that comment in that the parking is challenging. And when I say I was a kid, that I'm talking back in the early 70s. They were some of you go up and then you like land on the landing and then, but if you're a resident, you're going to be aware of that, as opposed to somebody that's coming in for, a commercial business, hasn't been there before. That's where it's challenging, because when you get up there, it's like, oh, what do I do now?
Right. And am I going in the outdoor and like, am I, it's such a strange parking situation. So I mean, I would think perhaps residential would just be make that arrangement better.
It could be possible to restructure that parking, to address your concern, Kelly, in terms of maybe having the spaces a little bit larger or whatever, because it is a large area. I think the request makes sense from the standpoint that we're seeing a significant amount of office space because of COVID and the changes that have occurred as a result of COVID really going into a non-use. And so retrofitting them into a residential use makes a lot of sense from that standpoint.
Here are some good photos of the parking. You can see on this photo right here, top middle, how it kind of goes steep uphill. And you can see then the terraces in the center picture here. Each parking access aisle is 10 feet up from the one beside it. And it just kind of makes terraces going up the back of the property.
If you have a Suburban, you're gonna have trouble getting in and out of that, some of that location.
I did say, I mean, I think my mind went, and you sort of touched on this, Stephen, I don't know if we have any say on it, but I would be sad to see it advertised as luxury apartments or studios, just because I think residential and apartments are needed, but I think we have to be aware of what the rent cost is to make it a solution to our need, right?
Yeah, that was not addressed in the application, so I can't speak to that.
No.
I think it's an excellent example of adaptive reuse and creating a great transition from commercial office to Camp Hill. I think just adding a multitude of different types of studio to 2-bedroom will only benefit, like you were saying, the near crisis that we have regarding housing.
Yeah, with the rezoning, the ability to, maybe there's less parking requirements, the overall redevelopment of the parcel, return to some green space, things like that. This could become a model project that we want to hold up as an opportunity as an example for other developers to follow in the future with these types of redevelopments.
Just a general question. I apologize. I didn't really read through this maybe totally carefully. The total square footage of the building is? And also, I was wondering how many parking spaces are there? And then under the typical ordinance, if it's changed to adaptive reuse, which I think is a great idea, could the number of parking spaces be reduced to address some of the parking issues?
There are, each floor is laid out on the property. I don't know the square footage of the building on the top of my head.
32,724.
Thank you.
We might have a job for you, Anita.
Yeah, I can't address the parking. The parking would be reduced by the conversion of that amount of square footage to the, I believe it's the 18 apartments or one initial. And to be honest, the last two residential units that we did with our planning commission, we also waived our 2.5 spots per unit. And I think we certainly at least consider that here too. But even with the 2.5 number of parking spots required would be reduced from what it would be for an office.
Well, along with everybody else, totally in favor of the rezoning. I guess the question would be if we wanted to make a comment about perhaps requiring a land development plan due to the adaptive reuse that would address some of the issues like parking and provide for safer, our goal would be safer public access.
I think through the local process, they'll take care of that. They'll have a zoning permit to be required for the change of use, and they'll take into all those considerations. Land development plan may not be required if there's not a land development activity being proposed, which I don't believe there is. Is there, Gene? I mean, it's just all internal stuff.
It's my understanding so far.
Okay.
Okay. Looking for a motion for Lemoyne?
I'll make the motion to rezone the commercial general zoning district to, sorry, hang on, I'm on the wrong thing here.
You're right.
Yeah, okay, I was on the right thing. The rezoning from the OG to the OR district.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. A motion and a second. Any additional comments or questions? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And moving on to South Newton Township. Mr. Hoffman.
South Newton Township created a new subdivision land development ordinance. We were initially, I've been meeting with the township staff every month, and initially they wanted us to take care of it. And I told them, we can write a lot of it, but their engineer is the one who enforces a lot of that, and they're going to have to be involved with specifications and requirements. And they talked to their engineer, and their engineer said, let us just write it for you. So their engineer, Martin & Martin, put the ordinance together, sent it to me unofficially. So Kirk and I went through and we made up several comments, and they went and addressed most of them. Some are just procedural or opinions that they did not address. And the whole process was very smooth, and they have now officially submitted to the Planning Commission for your recommendation.
Any questions for Mr. Hoffman? Looking for a motion?
Make a motion to recommend approval of the South Newton Township subdivision and land development ordinance.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any additional questions, comments? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Hoffman?
So West Pennsboro Township has submitted a request to change the county's future land use designation to 2 parcels. West Pennsboro, and they are actually located right here. There's 2 existing warehouses along Rittner Highway. Here's the drive-in, just to get yourself orient where we're at. Here's the drive-in. Here's the sheets. So these 2 farms here and here are both interested in farmland preservation. To be eligible for farmland preservation has to be consistent with the county comp plan. So they're coming before us to change their designation to rural. So what we're thinking about changing is this entire triangular piece, which would include just some residential uses. Change this to rural on the future land use map for the county. If these farms are in the program for preservation, we would then consider making these two properties conservation, because they would obviously be preserved farmland. Larry, is there anything you want to add from West Pennsburg's point of view?
The only thing I could add to that, Steve, is we recently, township went through several years of a update of our zoning ordinances and include our update of our map as well. And these two properties in particular were zoned industrial. So the applicant, which is one of our local residents and our supervisor, requested a change to agricultural zoning on them properties. He's looking to buy the properties from his mother, official, before, as a part of the estate and all that. He's gonna buy that and he would like, as you said, like to preserve that. So the county reviewed all that with us, agreed to the changes for our map. The Cumberland County Planning Commission actually approved or recommended approval of our changes. So just here to support the change. We had a lot of residents input over them 2-3 years of the rezoning, and they were all very pro agriculture and everything. So the Board of Supervisors, I talked to them about the letter of support to you guys to have this change, and they all were 100% on it. And the residents, liked the idea of it. So
Now, I know it is next to a warehouse,
correct.
but just to give a feel for the area before let's find the right place.
There is one additional industrial property right up the street from it.
Yeah, first I wanted to show that there are farms all around this that are permanently preserved here, shown in green.
Thank you.
And there are ag security areas shown in orange. So when you look at the aerial photo, you see it's next to industrial, but there's a lot of ag land around it, and a lot of it's permanent. And if you look at their zoning map, it is next to ag land to the northeast and southeast. And there is additional industrial land available here to the north.
So those properties are in the ASA now?
Yes.
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Good. So
We added them here recently. Them two properties or continue to be added. We did a 7-year review and that was updated.
great. And so the rural, do you have an agricultural zone or would it be rural zoning?
Ours would be agricultural.
Good. Okay, so it would completely fit with the county farmland preservation requirement of a property
Yes.
being both.
And that's one of the reasons we need this request
Right.
for the county land use map to be adjusted so they can be considered and have higher points.
Sure. And the act. I'd make a motion to recommend that those properties be changed to agricultural zoning as requested by West Pittsburgh Township.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? All in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Larry.
I thought Steve was providing breakfast. That's why I showed up.
Larry, you know we're too cheap for that.
I know, but I said Steve.
Awesome, thank you. Moving on to informational items.
Oh, wait, we got bylaws.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Wait, was that information?
Yeah, that was the first.
Oh, sorry. Bylaws update. So we had the all-star committee of George and Tim and Anita and Ed put this together in no time. So thanks for your efforts. I mean, some of these things for a normal commission would probably take 6 months to a year. It took these guys about 2.5 weeks. So you'll see that in the packet, we have the bylaws updated, the draft. Crosswalking them to our old ones is a little difficult because we reformatted them. The old format just did not work and it wasn't set up really well in Word. So we went back and reformatted them. I think that the main issues we were looking at as part of this, as we talked about last time, was the code of conduct for our planning commission members, especially social media, how we run our meetings, how conflicts of interest should be handled. So I think as you read through the bylaws, you'll see some of those things sticking out. There's some other just clarifications we made throughout the bylaws. So That's kind of the quick area. I think you really have to read them, to kind of get the full perspective. But I don't know if any of the committee members had anything that you wanted to report back of our efforts.
I just to describe the process a little bit. George kind of kicked this over to me. But, how there's a lot of metaphors about committees trying to write a document. Turns out to be sausage or some even worse than that. So what we did was pretty much we over-included a lot of stuff from other bylaws, nonprofits, took advantage of the county's personnel policies. Anita did a wonderful job of picking in some national standards for planners. And so it was a huge document. And then we kept kind of teasing it down and making sure we weren't missing anything. And then Kirk did a wonderful job to kind of simplify it, take out some of the duplications. So it was a good process, I think. I think we hit most of the important issues. And, like all bylaws, I think part of it is, I hope it would be useful to planning commission members to help them understand their job description. I think it's something we want to talk really openly and honestly about with people who apply on the planning commission. And it's something that, we should all be thinking about. I want it to be an active document, not a passive document. So we addressed a couple things that we had talked about at some of our retreats, using what do you call them, workshop meetings, for instance, and also kind of what should be the level of expertise of planning commission members. We want to have a big tent. We want to include people from around the county. We don't want all professional planners, but how do we educate folks on the planning commission if they've never been on a planning commission? What should be those requirements? So everybody's up to speed with the MPC, basic saldo ordinance, et cetera, to actually function well as a planning commission member. So I'd be interested if folks have any reactions to that. We're really not requiring it, but pretty much clearly saying if you come on to the planning commission, you should take responsibility to educate yourself on those issues.
Yeah, I would just reiterate what Ed brought up, the concerns or the interest that I was wanting to see was make sure that we have, like you said, a wide tent, a diverse opportunity for people to be a part of the commission, but they also should have a level of knowledge of what the commission is, what the responsibility is. The other point that I wanted to be sure that we addressed, and that is new member coming on, what some of the expectations are. And obviously we live in this world of social media. Once you're on there, it never goes away. So if you're out there, with a position, make it clear that it's your position and not a position of the board that you're representing or a member of. And you hit all of those points like right out of the gate. So thank you very much.
Well, Tim helped me with the social media.
All three of you put them together, and so we were able to take and condense that down. But I think those points, at least from my standpoint of what I was concerned with, were addressed very well.
Yeah, thank you, Kirk, for doing the
Oh, yeah. Problem.
Yeah, the one thing that stuck out to me that I don't know that I've ever seen on other boards was members recusing themselves must leave the room until commission completes discussion and takes action on said issues. I've never heard of that before, that members actually leave the room. I know they typically don't take place in the discussion or vote on that, but I don't know if that's something we want to reconsider.
Well, there's
such like George. It's not like we're gonna have George leave the room during the discussion we just had. So I'm not sure what the thought process was on that.
Well, some of this comes from there's some new legislation at the state level. About, using non-disclosure agreements, those kind of things. I think where I was coming from on it, and went back and forth, you and I, somewhat about this, actually, about should the person leave the room or not. I think we were after a clear standard. And I think the writing of this was, we have the public trust. And if we do not have the public trust as a planning commission, then I'm not sure what we're doing here, right? So having the public trust and the ultimate level of transparency, in my mind, is a crucial factor for us to function as a board, or a commission rather. I think it's taking the larger step. It's going a little bit beyond what would be maybe required, right? I mean, everybody understands that if I have a fiduciary or a financial interest, I'm going to excuse myself from the discussion, or I'm not going to vote on it. But if you're someone sitting in the public, and I'm still sitting here and I'm smiling or frowning or doing whatever I might do, right, to influence some of my colleagues, it could be perceived, right? Perceived that there is a conflict and that you're using influence. So I think the standard would be along the lines of best practices, really. I mean, we're all familiar with BMPs, right? When you have a conflict of interest, the best BMP is to get up and leave the room so that you're not having any influence on the decision and that it's clear to everybody. I actually had some language in there that suggested that not only should someone say they have a conflict, they should define what the conflict is, right? So George has a business interest in this thing, so he excluded himself. But what does that mean? Are you co-owner of one of those properties? I don't know. We want full transparency in order that the community can really trust us. I mean, Kelly, when an issue came up about Middlesex, I believe it was, she got up and left the room. So that there was no implication that she was influencing any of that discussion. And again, I think my view would be, why would we not want to require ourselves to use the absolute best standards? What would be the problem with that? And I'd be open and very open to your comments.
Why would because it's a meeting that's open to the general public.
I'm sorry?
It's a meeting that's open to the general public. So I don't see, unless there's some other precedent that I'm not aware of, I don't see the need of totally removing himself. I think you should identify up front before the discussion starts and absolutely not take place in the discussion. And I don't have any problem with what you were saying about identifying what the actual conflict is.
I mean, maybe you're feeling the same way that I do. And I think, Ed, I commented on this too. And I missed our follow-up meeting where you guys made the edits. To me, I think that it isn't necessarily a best practice to get up and leave the room because you're creating a picture of, you're almost elevating the issue by getting up and leaving to make it seem like it's worse than it really is.
Well, but if you don't, I understand that that's a concern.
I don't think that just sitting in your seat and allowing the discussion to happen around you.
Yeah, I would ask you, because you actually, and I had this discussion, should the person just sit there and recuse themselves and not be able, or should they actually leave the room? Get into this issue of trying to.
Well, and I mean, there's multiple ways to address it. The commissioner could remain in his seat at the dais. The commissioner could recuse himself to the gallery. The commissioner could also to leave the room. And I think when we were discussing it a couple weeks ago, I think the thought was, well, if what our goal is complete transparency and creating comfortability, non-bias, perhaps taking that step of leaving the room would be the appropriate step. But this is a committee and there are other ways to handle that type of conflict as well. And I think that's why it's on the agenda for discussion.
Yeah, I think the idea too is if someone's presence in the room is an influence on the discussion, on either the parties presenting or on the rest of the planning commission, they're gone.
Maybe that's the compromise, is to, if it is the right appropriate action for the specific circumstance. But like in this case, like George just recused himself, he was still able to call the vote. We didn't have to delegate to somebody else to handle that specific action item,
Right, but, and George, I respect completely what you've said. I'm not second guessing you. I'm just taking the position that I'm in the public seating. And this is, the Hampton Township is a huge conflict. You have a conflict of interest. Does George own one of those properties? Right? Did George get $1 million for that?
Just for the record, the company that I work for does IT work for,
Okay.
Good Hope Ventures. So I think that's very on the periphery of that, but I did not want to have any influence on that decision that was made.
And I respect that completely, but I think just saying what that conflict is helps the public understand why you're recusing yourself. At the very least.
And this goes into the interpretation in my mind of conflict, because Ed, you've hit something, typically a conflict, I think by the way that we've interpreted it at the Board of Commissioners is a pecuniary benefit. And so that's a little bit extraneous for George to have a pecuniary benefit unless he had ownership of the company. And then, so it is really, splitting hairs on what is a conflict as well. So, and to your point though, Ed, I have met, and Tim, I have trouble controlling this. So, my expression sometimes. So, and I just chose to, because I'm not technically even part of this board. When that conversation came up, I'm not a voting member. So, but I don't do that when I'm seated as a board of commissioner. If I have a conflict, but we actually write out in advance a notice that I give to the solicitor that says I have a conflict, and it may not even be financial, but that's often, I think that is the hardcore definition of conflict is financial. So
That's what we all attest to in our, required statement. The question I have for us is, again, if the strength of what we do is based on the public trust, and this would be the same conversation for township supervisors, how do we hold ourselves to the absolute best practice? What's the downside? What's the downside, for you, Matt, if you do get up and leave and say, I have a conflict because I represent the developer and the engineering thing. What's the sacrifice for you? What's the negative outcome for you to get up and leave the room until that decision is made? Does it have a big negative effect for you?
I just feel like it's elevating the issue farther than it needs to be, as far as actually leaving the room and then being like going out and be like, okay, we're done with the discussion. You can come back in now. I just feel like it's making a mountain out of a molehill. Like,
Yeah, to speak plainly, like you're creating the perception, I think, that when you talk about public trust, if I have to get up and leave the room because of what I believe to be the right thing to do, now somebody in the audience is like, oh, well, this guy sucks. I can't trust this guy. You know what I mean?
Well,
I mean, that's just the devil's advocate.
I think it may be based on how much of a connection there is to, in just for today's example, the rezoning. If it's Matt's property, then maybe he would have to make his own.
That would, I feel like, almost make 100% sense.
Right.
If it's that close of a relationship, yes.
But if your cousin's neighbor works for their brother's, babysits their brother's dog, do you really have to leave the room,
Yeah.
But you may still say, well, I know these guys, so I'm a little biased, so I'm going to recuse. But you don't, in that case, you wouldn't have to leave the room. Right?
I think
George, I don't think George had to leave the room for.
I think that's kind of where I'm at. It's like a common sense approach.
Yeah, but I think if George was CEO of Good Hope Ventures, and maybe George would have said, I'm really attached to this. So
I'd have been sick today.
But I think it's, from what I'm hearing, the back and forth, maybe it should be up to the individual, but they should be aware.
Well, and I think what it could be, to your point, it's kind of that difference between a real conflict of financial or otherwise, or a perceived conflict of interest. And, that's a perceived is where you can still disclose. You don't have to go into specifics, but you can still dice but not participate in the vote if that's what you so choose. Even though technically, even if it's a perceived, you can still vote.
What to George's point, you attend online that day.
So,
I think it's,
This is not a criticism of anybody, the language here. But if you go out to enough community meetings, you know that the issue of transparency and openness is a huge issue in the community. It's been elevated because of the data centers. 30 years ago, it was elevated because of the warehouses. And again, I'm looking at it from the perspective of best practice. And I'm just one vote. I'm not I am trying to sell you on this, but I'm trying to give you the perspective that I'm coming from in terms of public trust and transparency. What we're talking about right now is part of what we struggle with, not having a clear statement. So now we're leaving it up to the person to decide, do I disclose this? Do I disclose it and not vote? Do I stay in the room? I think we're all mature enough that if I owned this piece of property, I would have excused myself from the room. I might not even come to the meeting, right? Because of a conflict, so that there would be no perception. But do we want to leave all of those decisions just up to the individual? At some level, you have to, but I was looking.
At some level, it's up to them at all whether they bring it up.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think
Well, I
that's
didn't
part of why.
foresee any conflict, so I didn't recuse myself. I'm president of the board of Central Pennsylvania Conservancy, but just because we just voted on a $100,000 grant for them, I don't see it as a conflict.
Just for the record, I'm using myself as the example. Prior to the meeting, I met with Kirk and shared what my intent was to make sure that I was going down the right path. So if Kirk would have said, I think you probably ought to sit out, then I would have started the meeting and then I would have sat out on that. So I was sensitive to my relationship. And I think this is a good discussion because I could have said our company provides IT services. It's not my company. But so it's an example of, what I used was I wanted to confide in somebody prior to the meeting to get a consensus of how to move forward.
And I do the same with Kirk, and Kirk is a great resource, but I think we also need to be aware that we are an independent commission. To some extent, Kirk works for us, and we as an independent commission have to monitor and regulate ourselves. And so we can't always look to Kirk to solve our issues. He's a resource, he's a huge resource, but we have our own bylaws, we have our own process, we make our own decisions.
I don't see that I think using you as a sounding board as far as whether or not it would be appropriate or let's look at it this way would be out of line. I don't think that's perfectly reasonable. And I like the idea of disclosing it before the meeting and bringing it to the attention to have people collectively say, I think maybe this is serious enough that you should excuse yourself. But to make it a general blanket requirement, I do think that's a little beyond over what is needed, just as a member of other boards that I've not seen that as a requirement. But
yeah, and I also think, again, I'm coming at this from the nonprofit world, which is quite different, really. But in my mind, the chair is the person that we should be going to and saying, George, I've got this potential conflict. What do you think? You may check with Kirk, but it's really the board's decision. The board is an independent, functioning organization from the department.
in the case that it is the chair, it would be appropriate to go to the head of the organization.
And also shared with Kelly before the meeting as well.
Yep. Yeah, I'm not wedded to it. It's a draft. Obviously, there's a lot of concerns about it, but I just would encourage all of us to think, how do we make these bylaws reflecting the best practices of this organization, with one of the primary concerns being not only not only knowledge and experience, but also transparency and public trust. And I'm not implying that we haven't done that.
My personal opinion.
I'm
saying best practice. My personal opinion is that just because it's more punitive doesn't mean that it's the best practice. I think there's other ways to convey public trust by holding yourself accountable as an individual. And I think by having these bylaws in place and signing off that we've read them and understand them, allows us to be, as individuals, responsible for the own decisions that we make.
Yeah, I think so. I think it gives structure.
Or change it to the point like conflicts of interest shall be reviewed with the chairman prior to the meeting. And then let the chairman and or Kurt make the call as far as like, no, I think you're a little too close to that issue. Maybe you want to sit down.
I think that's a great idea. So if
Kind
I
of
anticipate a conflict, I will discuss that conflict with the chair prior to the meeting.
Yeah.
And we will discuss one of three alternatives.
Yeah.
I don't need to disclose it. I'll disclose it and recuse myself from the vote, noting in some specificity what that conflict is, or if it's significant enough, I remove myself.
Yeah.
from the room.
Yeah, because I agree, I think it was Steve's point, like if you're close enough to the issue, like you probably should be out of the room.
Yeah.
Yeah, like if it's your own parcel or something you're very closely involved with, I do think that's a good idea. I think most of the ones we've seen come up though have not been that.
No.
Yeah.
Would you as chair be comfortable with that, George? That's
No
part of the
problem. No
definition of what the chair's responsibility is.
I have no problem with that. And I think this has been a good discussion because we were identifying something that didn't exist prior. Like Tim brought up, as a member or a new member, you're going to read, you're going to acknowledge that you read, you're going to sign off on it. That's a level of integrity. And now what we're saying is, hey, there may be an issue that you have a conflict with, and there's three options. I have no problem with that, and I would hope that nobody would going forward. Obviously, if it's, your 8 cousins dog catcher, like Steve identified, you can probably stay here and vote. If it's the other scenario of, oh, I own 3 of these properties that are going to be rezoned, yeah, you probably ought to leave the room.
This is one issue, comments on today, it's draft.
Exactly.
So what I was thinking is if the members review this, send comments back to me, we'll update it for the next meeting. What I'd like to do is get the commission's concurrence on the bylaws, and then share them back with the Board of Commissioners. They appoint us, and they're interested in these things too. Also consistency across the county for other boards. And then we'll share it back to them if they have any suggestions for us, and hopefully get it on for approval, late summer.
That's fine.
Ed had asked me to take a look, and I was late in getting back to him, but a couple comments that I have on the competence in education, and I'm a very strong proponent of education, and I can draft some language. I think that ought to be strengthened.
Sure.
That an initial orientation ought to occur for all new members whenever they come on board. And as I said, I can provide Kirk
that wasn't
some
before,
language along those lines. But if the board is willing to, agree that there should be an initial orientation. I mean, the language right now says members shall maintain a working knowledge of the MPC, et cetera. It doesn't really say how that is to happen. I think an initial orientation.
We have some draft language in there before that we can use, I think.
Yeah, we had the lengthy version got into reimbursement for going to continuing education programs on the MPC or on, planning in general. Then we got into how would you decide whether or not you pay for that, and how would you decide what the budget was going to be.
I don't think you need to go.
Right.
No, it wasn't even, it was like meeting with the planning director, I think, to review the.
And in practice, that happens, right?
It does.
So I think what's great about bylaws would also be to put into what is happening in practice.
Right.
So I think that's a great.
Yeah, I don't, I think it would be great to have more language in there. And I frankly would say that a sentence that says, members are encouraged to seek outside education and can apply for funding.
I sent something over, Fred. Send it, I'll take a look at it.
Okay.
I think it'd be great.
All right.
Yeah. I just want to ask you, Anita, because you had a lot of detail that was great. Is there anything you'd like to see fleshed out? in the Final version?
I mean, I do like the idea from an educator standpoint to have, at a very minimum, meeting with Kurt or the planning director prior to the start of the first meeting. I think it's critical just to get in, and how that's defined, a sentence or two, I think would go a long way into ensuring somebody that's thinking about applying for this, what are some of the minimal expectations are.
This is going to sound trivial considering the rest of our conversation, but one thing that stood out to me was it does say after a 2-year term, but there's nothing that says like you wait a year and you can come back, or is it you're done, you never for your, like, is there an opportunity to come back and serve again at any point in time?
Is that for an officer position?
Yeah, or no, for a member of the board, yeah.
So we have a 4-year term, 2 4-year terms, and after that, yeah, we don't, I think they're silent on whether or not somebody could come back on the board.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
I think that should be outlined. I think that you have the opportunity or you don't, like, so.
What would your suggestion be?
I think, you wait a certain amount of time and then you may apply again because we all review, we review the applications and it should be a consideration, but.
So like, serve two 4-year terms, then a year off, and then potentially coming back.
Or even keep it the same. If you're off for 2, you can't come back for 8 years.
You got a long cycle.
That would keep the mix
Going, so maybe off for 4 years because that's a term and then you could reapply if you were interested in.
What other people think of that? That's an intriguing idea that I've just assumed you never come back.
I know when we instituted the bylaws, that was a question. I'm like, well, what if someone comes back and, always welcome everybody back, but we've been very successful in recruiting new members. And I haven't seen the need to reappoint someone, especially when there's other qualified candidates that come on to have it served.
And so what's the underlying assumption for that statement, that it's good to get new people with new ideas? And
I think that's generally been our perspective, right?
Yeah, is that
it's good to have people with new ideas?
Yeah.
That's always been kind of the vibe, I think.
Yeah.
This board has been exceptional at that. We have other boards that did not have any term limits and things like that. And it really doesn't then engage as many residents as we would like. So we've made a very active approach to try and get those situations remedied. But giving someone an option to potentially return after a certain time period, I don't think that would limit if you continue to seek out other applicants and that sort of thing.
I will say, like, when I first started 8 years ago, the demand for membership was a lot less than it is now.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't be on the board.
If they all feel that, I wouldn't have been chosen.
But there could be a time in the future where, you're just really hurting members and you need to go back and re-recruit somebody that was on before to fill a seat because, somebody moves away or illness or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is the conclusion then we're going to funnel feedback to Kirk?
You send it on to me, we'll update it for the next meeting.
The two major things I'm hearing, we're going to expand the educational section and we're going to rework the recusal section to be consulting with the chair of the commission with consideration of one of 3 optional responses. Well, 4. I don't think you need to disclose Cousin Louis' situation, and then up through that. I'm just trying to summarize that.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I think just generally, I'm pretty happy that we did this. I mean, it can seem really boring and mundane to go through bylaws, and maybe it is for a lot of people, but, in a day and age where public trust is like, it's such a premium, I think that, finding ways to meaningfully improve our own bylaws to better convey that to the public. And, it's not like we're going to go out to Penn Live and, hey, look, we updated our bylaws to, have public trust. But But it is kind of cool to be able to like share that with folks and say like, hey, look, this is something that we take seriously, and like, you know, we're walking the walk too. We're not just, you know, a lot of people out there nowadays that don't convey public trust. So good exercise.
Yes, you get the comments to Kirk and then we'll look at them again.
Next month, yeah.
Thanks for looking at them, everyone.
All right, subdivision and land development activity. We're looking at, again, in June, we look at all the plans from May. Had 8 plans come in. There's a list of the bigger plans on the agenda. Anybody has questions on plan submissions, you can always stop by my office or call it and we can look over. For the MPC submissions, it was actually a pretty busy month. We saw 8 MPC submission. We have 14 year to date. Last year, this time we had 22. So things are still slower than they were last year. And again, if there's a question on any of these, you can feel free to stop by my office and we can chat.
Next item on the agenda.
Legislative report.
Here we go.
Yeah, okay, well, you have the legislative report, Nate updated some of the bills that are on there. Again, provide that for your information. If you have questions on this stuff, let us know. Really don't have any updates to provide there. Although just one that I have to check, I haven't looked into this. One we're working with, Representative Nate Davidson reached out to us. As last year, I talked to Senator Rothman's staff. There's some funding we get from the state for bridges. It's through the Marcellus Shale Legacy Fund. And there's a requirement for any of the money that we spend on those bridges be structurally deficient or in poor condition. It's a needless requirement. Like for us, we're proactive on our bridge stock. So we only have a handful of poor condition bridges. It really ties our hands to the spending on that. Senator Rothman got a bill through the Senate. Representative Nate Davidson called us and said he's going to introduce a bill in the House to do the same thing, and he believes there's support to potentially move that ahead. So I think that's just a great example. As we express our needs to our legislators that they are responsive to some of the issues we have. So we'll be working with our legislators on that one. They don't have a big impact on our bridge funding too. We'll have some funds that previously were only tied to certain bridges now be able to spend broadly.
All righty.
Consistency letters, you see those, some grants, grant season, a lot of stuff coming in.
Kirk, on those, there were a couple that the municipality was not really referenced. Can you include the municipality that's involved with those?
Sure. Yep. Jess, that's one of our database fields too, right?
We have organizations.
Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
necessarily.
So we'll just start.
You
Okay.
can see some of them do list the townships as the
Yeah,
organization.
for the ones that we don't, though, we want to get the municipality where the project is located.
Like Community Care Point, Mountainside Preschool,
Got it.
that
Okay.
was municipality.
Okay, sounds good. We'll do that.
All right.
June dashboard, I know we're almost 2 hours in, so you can, if there's any questions on that, just one kind of update that isn't on there yet. We're talking with the Cumberland Conservation Collaborative about doing public forum sometime this fall focused on water. So I think the data center one was really a good opportunity for us to, get back out on hot issues, had a lot of participation, looking at, talk with staff saying we want to do these on a regular basis. I think some of the guidance the board has been giving us about more public outreach. The water issue is one that came up in a conservation collaborative meeting. I know staff's been working with them, and Elizabeth's going to work with them as well. So we're trying to scope out what that may look like. If we get some more ideas on that, we'll bring that back to the board.
We'll back up one and we'll go to Commissioner Nieder.
Oh, I don't have anything huge
Okay.
to report on, but just this our group may be interested in. I know Kirk and I were invited to a PennDOT announcement of some modifications that are planned for Route 15 in Dillsburg that we were told it was going to carry into Upper Allen Township, but it looks like that construction is really confined to York County. But they're basically taking the section from Cumberland County to Range End Golf Course and widening it to from 4 to 6 lanes.
Wow.
And it will begin in 28 and go through 31. So there was a lot of really good discussion from the folks on the ground because it wasn't really helping with the one interchange at the PNC and Sheets that's misaligned. So that was in the hopper and interesting, even though it's not in Cumberland County. Just wanted to just raise a little bit of awareness to this group. I am the liaison to CREDIC at Harrisburg Chamber and CREDIC. They have been engaged to try and come up with a plan to revitalize Harrisburg. I know that it is across the river to us, but that is a relevant, driver for our area as well. So they are doing surveys. If any of you wanted to complete a survey, please feel free to go on their website and offer guidance. They have gotten a lot of interest in the community and being involved in this planning. So I would encourage you with the wonderful thoughts that you all have for us here in Cumberland to help offer your perspective over there as well. I did go on a tour with the Conservation Department yesterday, which was fantastic for half the day, out to see a lot of the work they're doing. And what it really resonated with me is when we talk about our farmland preservation, we don't talk about all that means that we are doing to support agriculture. And this is a huge component too. So I think as a commissioner, we need to figure out how to better incorporate that when we're talking about everything we're doing to support sustainable agriculture in Cumberland County. Summer fair for our public safety is Friday the 26th. So that's coming up in a week. So 10 to 2, if you know of any kids or you have in a development where there's a lot of little kids, let the moms know that there's all kinds of fire trucks and emergency equipment that they can get up close, see up close and personal. And we are welcoming on July 10th the International Fellows from the Army War College. And I just share that from the interest. If you, it's just a fascinating thing to see their perspective on government and the questions that they ask from Finland or, all of the areas that come and are represented there. And lastly, I think I may have mentioned already before, but we are meeting with the delegation. This, as Kirk referenced, coordinating and working with them is really becoming more and more critical to the success of our county and the region. So we will be meeting with them to share our new strategic plan because they play a role in that as we talk about regionalization and working collaboratively with them. So I'm looking forward to doing that. I don't know that that's ever been done. So we're looking forward to it. That's it for me, unless anyone has any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have any coordinating agencies on?
Shannon is on.
All right, really quick. I'm going to limit my comments. Frog Switch project, quick update. We did receive a $750,000 revolving loan fund through the state of Pennsylvania, DCD. You may hear it referred to as ISRP, but it is actually EPA funds. We also did receive our demolition permit. So you will start to see demo happening. It's happening toward the back already. We need to finish our abatement and get the foundry sand out before you'll see significant demo occurring on site. But I wanted to call that to your attention. And while we were in this meeting today, we've had another break-in, and this was to the office. So this happens now about once every 2 weeks, people breaking into the site. Last two things, quick. Just want to call your attention to June 30th. We will be launching in partnership with the U.S. Army Heritage and Education Center, Patriots Path. It's one of our digital tourism paths that we'll be promoting. There's an event from 11 to 12:30. Would love to see some of you there for that. And finally, on next week, the 22nd, from 9 to 11:30, we are holding a downtown revitalization, Main Streets and small business growth seminar. So would love to see some of you there, or feel free to announce those things. And if you need more detail, let me know.
Thank you. Anybody else have any comments or questions for a meeting today?
Very briefly, I noticed a recent news release about two significant farmland preservation projects that were funded for Cumberland County. I forget the location now, but they were significant.
One of them was Lehman View. One of them was Lehman View, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw that too.
Maybe I could just piggyback on that. I was at the Upper Allen Township Board of Commissioners meetings last night, and Upper Allen is in the process of doing a voters referendum to establish a township level preservation program similar to Silver Springs. It's been a little bit start and stop. I know Matt was at the meeting, but I basically presented a letter from Stephanie, because Stephanie wasn't able to be there, about the county's position on that. Vince DiFilippo and Frank Eaglehawk from Silver Spring made a very strong case that it should move forward and let the voters decide, is kind of the perspective that was done. So I just mentioned that there is a public meeting on Monday, June 22nd at 6:30 at Upper Allen Township to get comments. The commissioners are seeking comments, and they're hoping that the Natural Lands Trust, who they have been working with, will do a presentation on their findings. They have about 1,500 acres that they've identified as potentially preserved. Not many big farms, of course, because it's so developed. But for those, maybe background, it's the first time in 13 years. Well, I guess South Middleton tried it a number of years ago, but other than Silver Spring did this 13 years ago, and it's been talked about widely that townships need to also get in the game and think about this. So I'm very supportive of it, not without its considerations and discussions, but I would encourage you to think about that, because if it goes through, it would be another example and hopefully be a model for other townships as well.
Thank you.
Yes, last night on 21 News, our township manager was on. There was talk about FPRs. There must in West Pennsboro Township. Wish I could have said something to Larry before he left. I thought he presented the case very well. I thought he was very professional, and just thought it was well done.
Thank you. Anybody else? For a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
No second.
Second.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody. See you in a month.
Yeah, so
Yeah, this afternoon, we do this.